Let's go to one of our online questions. This one's coming from Michelle, and she wants to know how the criminal justice reform is coming along. She has a friend in prison, and this bill could reduce their sentence if it's passed.
Michelle, thank you for asking about criminal justice reform. This is an issue that I've been concerned about for several years. I've seen a disturbing series of trends within the law. One is the over-criminalization of the law generally. Another is the over-federalization of criminal law. And then within the federal prison system, we've seen too many people being sent away for too long a period of time because of an excessive reliance on frequently excessive minimum mandatory penalties within the federal penal system. For example, there was a young man in Utah named Weldon Angelos who was sentenced to prison about 12 years ago. Weldon Angelos committed some crimes. He sold marijuana on 3 different occasions, relatively modest increments, but because he had a gun on his person at the time, a gun that he didn't wield, brandish, or discharge, but he had on his person at the time nonetheless, he received a minimum mandatory sentence of 55 years. So Weldon Angelos was in his mid-20s at the time he was convicted. He was the father of 2 young children. If he serves his entire sentence, he won't be released until he's about 80 years old. I've never met anyone who believed that that sentence was just. Not even the sentencing judge, then Federal District Judge Paul Cassell, prior to sentencing Mr. Angelos, issued a lengthy opinion in which he explained, this is unjust, this is wrong. We're sending this man away for way too long. He did break the law and he deserves to be punished, but not for 55 years. I've never met anyone who thought that was a legitimate punishment. It's one of the reasons why when I got to the Senate a few years ago, I started looking into this issue, because Judge Cassell said at the time, Congress is the only entity that can fix this problem. Judges can't fix it, it has to be Congress. So I teamed up with what some would regard as an unlikely ally, Senator Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin is a liberal Democratic senator from Illinois. I'm not a liberal Democrat, I'm a conservative Republican, but Senator Durbin and I agree that we need to reform our federal criminal justice system. So he and I started working together, and we've teamed up with others, including Chuck Schumer from New York, Cory Booker from New Jersey, Pat Leahy from Vermont, all Democrats, as well as Chuck Grassley from Iowa, a Republican, and the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, John Cornyn, another Republican, who's the assistant majority leader in the Senate. We all joined up and we've presented a bill called the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act. And this would make modest but necessary adjustments to our federal minimum mandatory sentencing systems, particularly as they relate to nonviolent, low-level drug offenses. And it would allow for some people like Mr. Angelos to reopen their case in federal court and give the judge discretion in deciding how much time they really needed to serve in prison. Now, this is important for many reasons. Some have said that it's important because it's expensive to incarcerate people, and that's true. It costs us about $30,000 a year to imprison someone within the federal system. But that's not the most important cost. The most significant cost, the one that I'm most worried about, is the human cost, the fact that we're locking up fathers and sons and husbands and nephews and uncles for years at a time, sometimes for decades at a time, sometimes to a degree that's plainly excessive in relation to the offense committed by the prisoner. That's why I've gotten behind this effort. That's why I've drafted the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act. And I'm pleased to tell you that tomorrow morning we're going to be holding an important vote on this piece of legislation. We'll be voting on it in the Senate Judiciary Committee, on which I serve. I'm not sure what the vote will be, but I believe and I'm confident that it's going to pass. And I think it's going to pass with a significant majority, including both Republicans and Democrats supporting it. Once it passes out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I look forward to it passing on the Senate floor and then passing in the House of Representatives. Thank you for asking about this issue. This is a very important reform. And as one of my colleagues recently said, it's probably the most important and sweeping criminal justice reform that we've had in Congress in an entire generation.